good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are at the moment. And welcome to our third installment now of the monthly series, The State of AI Search. The goal here is to continue to keep everybody apprised of what's developing in the AI search space. AI search can mean AI overview, it can mean the LLMs like ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude. It can mean the use of AI as a force multiplier for forms of traditional search. So it's everything AI oriented in the search marketing landscape for automotive. I'm Zach Billings, co-founder and CEO of Wikimotive. For those of you who don't know me, Wikimotive is a boutique marketing agency with a specialization in search in particular. And I've been doing a fresh seminar and a fresh set of research every at least 6 months since ChatGPT launched a number of years ago now. So it's been wild to see the whole landscape evolve. There is tons of validity to ways that consumers are now using this technology as part of their journey to buying or servicing a car. There is also an enormous amount of myth and misunderstanding when it comes to what vendors are saying, what OEMs are saying, what our own echo chamber is saying. There are a lot of assumptions that turn into a belief of fact. And we want to make sure that we're separating myth from reality so that we can all properly orient ourselves and decide what is true, what is not, and be able to identify where we should be putting our budget and our resources. If anyone hears stats or hears me talk about things on here and you're like, oh, where did that come from? Remember, there are two episodes that came before this. We're not going to go back over all of the subject matter that we've covered before. Check out our YouTube channel. The previous webinars are available there as videos you can watch. They are still very much current. The first installation was very good homework, groundwork for those of you who have not seen current data on 2026 status for what kind of market share can you get out of the AI search space, the ChatGPTs and Geminis of the world. How much of the available consumer search pie, if you will, can you get from those things? And the answer is only about 0.5% of the available people who are searching for dealers or for inventory. Okay. So I'm going to come back to that point a couple of times. The first installation of this is where you should go if you want to see the details on the data, where that came from, what the studies look like. Very quickly, we'll recap last month's episode. So we are conducting a study at Wikimotive, and we're looking at more and more and more dealers and a ton of parameters. And the goal of the study is to stay on top of what levers and knobs actually have an impact on visibility in something like ChatGPT or Gemini when someone's searching for a dealer discovery keyword like best Ford dealers near Seattle, or an inventory discovery keyword like Silverados under 50K near Dallas. Okay. So what we're looking at is lower funnel prompts that would be commonplace based on available traditional search data. And what we're doing is we're looking at all of these different parameters, and we're looking at the top cited dealers, and we're looking at things like, was there content on the page? How good was the content? Was there inventory on the page? What website provider was the dealer using? Was their location closest to the metro in question? What was their star rating? And so on and so forth, to the point where we're collecting over 5,000 data points per dealer in our test. And so it's becoming a very scientific test with a lot of data points. And I'm going to continue to resurface the findings from that study as they continue to provide more and more and more clarity in this webinar series. So keep on coming back for that. In the last episode, we were able to already identify a lot of common threads. One of the most fascinating things to me, which really reinforces the kind of the through thread that we're going to talk about today, is that written content on the page was the number one predictor of being cited in an LLM result, even for something like an inventory search. If you typed in an inventory search, such as like Silverados under 50K near Dallas, 90% of the dealer results that showed up had content. Only 70% had inventory, even though it's an inventory search. Schema did not seem to be a significant predictor. Website vendor, not a significant predictor. So fascinating that content continues to look like it's king, even in this environment. Okay. And so what we're finding time and time again, and this is being supported more and more by Google as well for the Gemini ecosystem. And trust me, it will end up being part and parcel across most of the LLMs as they return these results, is that the things that we call SEO fundamentals are really search optimization fundamentals. GEO, generative engine optimization, the techniques that are supposed to give you better visibility in AI search, like on ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude, they are an extension of a search optimization discipline. You want to get more low funnel people to your website and engaging with your dealership so that you can sell and service more cars. Well, it's not just about SEO. It's about SEO and GEO, and then also those ancillary impacts over to SEM. It's about optimizing for search. And we need to zoom out and start thinking about it that way and stop compartmentalizing. Okay. So that's going to be the through put on this episode. And the method that we're going to use here is we're going to look at a handful of topics, okay? And we're going to go through myth, reality, action. So the myth is going to be things that you commonly will have heard as claimed truths. A lot of these come from either misunderstanding that's being repeated again and again and again to the point where it's being crystallized as supposedly true when it's not necessarily, or they're myths that are being repeated by the vendor community because if they can convince you that GEO is a different discipline, they can charge you money for it. Okay. And I want to unpack this to the point where you know how to allocate your resources, whether it be dollars to a vendor or internally at the dealership when you think about how are we going to exercise what's available to us to be able to improve our visibility. Okay. So GEO is not a new bespoke discipline. It's being talked about like it is, but it's not because many of the fundamentals are in common with traditional search. And remember, only 0.5% of your low funnel opportunity today is coming from LLMs. People use ChatGPT and Gemini in spades for their high funnel research part of their automotive journey, right? If somebody is weighing an F-150 versus a Silverado purchase, or they're trying to decide, do I want a new F-150 or a used F-150, they're using their preferred LLM in more and more and more significant numbers. It's north of 20% of people regularly using an LLM, as in more than 10 times per month. It's more than 50% that use them at least once a month. So people are exposed to this technology. They are using it for high funnel. But when you start to get to that last mile, to I need to find that inventory. I need to find a dealer that serves that make. It is much easier, fundamentally easier to use traditional search for that. And consumers are understanding that during their normal workflow. It's not becoming a this or that. It's becoming a use this for what it's good at, use this for what it's good at. And so GEO is also interestingly, for the percentage that it does represent in terms of opportunity, it is responding to different things than what people are talking about. So the idea is that AEO, which is optimization for things like the AI overview on Google, or GEO, which is going to be supposed to be optimizing for things like ChatGPT or Gemini. The idea is that they require different strategies that are fundamentally not the same as your SEO. Examples might be FAQs need to be prevalent on your pages. Is that true? Well, the data so far is not suggesting it is. And that schema is going to be the most important thing. Is the data suggesting that's true? No, it's not. And the idea is that SEO is dying. We no longer need to think about SEO. It's all about GEO now. And I'm here to tell you, even if AI ultimately ends up being the larger share of the available market in terms of low funnel, even if AI use for low funnel searches goes from the 0.5% of opportunity now to north of 50%. I'm not saying it won't. It may just take some time. If that happens, the levers and the knobs are still very similar to today's traditional search optimization. So it's not that you need to do SEO and not GEO. It's not that you should be doing GEO and not SEO. It's that you need to be focusing on how enormous the overlap is in the Venn diagram and how much the two are the same thing and not buy into the wrong stuff. Okay. So let's think about intent. For over a decade now, Google has continued to iterate their algorithms forward towards an end goal. What is the end goal? The end goal, from a traditional search standpoint, an organic search standpoint, is position one should statistically be the most correct to the user's need, right? If you're looking for F-150s, it should have information about buying an F-150 and it should have F-150s on the page, right? Those two things would make it the most accurate result in theory. Position two should be the statistically second most relevant, and so on. And Google is always tweaking the algorithm and their understanding of content to be able to continue to align to that endpoint. Okay. So, why do they do this? It's not really for the goodness of humanity, right? It's not just for charity. It's fundamentally that having a search engine that returns the best result for the end user keeps people coming back to Google and not Bing, where they get exposed to ads, where Google makes their ad revenue. It's just economics. And so if we just follow that natural extension, right? Why do you use your preferred LLM? Why do you use Claude? Why do you use Gemini? Why do you use ChatGPT? Whatever your preferred LLM is, why are you using it? Because you, for some reason, are under the impression that it is the LLM that provides the style and information that you best resonate with, right? That you think is either the most accurate information, it's best at parsing your need, maybe it's spreadsheets, maybe it's just consumer advice. Whatever that is, you use that LLM because you think it's the best for your needs. So if you're doing a low funnel search, and we assume that in some future state, more than 50% of consumers are doing their low funnel searches on ChatGPT and Gemini, well, it behooves them to provide the best quality content, the best alignment for that end user's need. That keeps their market share high, which means that the very near term, sometime probably next year, ad models that are going to start to come into real existence and out of their beta phases start to produce revenue. And also your subscription fees to use the platform continue to go to their bottom line as opposed to you switching over to a different LLM. So what I'm getting at here is long-winded, but put your common sense hat on. If Google has spent 15 years iterating their algorithms to produce the best alignment in end results to the user's need, and that's all in the name of market share and therefore ad revenue, why wouldn't the LLMs be doing the same thing? They are doing the same thing. They already are. And that's why content is 90% the predictor for something showing up as a cited result for an inventory or dealer discovery keyword versus inventory only being 70% and a lot of the other factors being less, because the content is still king for the same exact reason. Okay. So the action item here is you need to stop thinking, how do I do AEO? How do I do GEO? How do I show up in ChatGPT? How do I show up in AI overview? And start thinking, how do I provide the best information for the intended consumer need that I'm targeting? I'm a Ford dealer and someone's looking for an F-150 for sale in my region. How do I provide the best information around that? How do I provide the best clarity, the easiest pathway to look at inventory, differentiators between the F-150 and the 250 in case somebody showed up typing in F-150, but really they need the towing capacity of the 250. You need to flesh that out. You need to provide why buys. All of that information serves both SEO, GEO, AEO, and also improves quality score for SEM, right? So I want everyone to think in terms of this as a holistic approach. There are some unique factors that are only impacting GEO that don't so much impact SEO, at least not yet, but that gap will close on both ends. The LLMs will more and more respond to understanding content, and the traditional search environment will also continue to adapt with their own AI underpinned algorithms now to understand things that maybe were a little bit more nuanced that they weren't looking for before. So, for instances, your offers in your pricing, right? You look at a VDP and you look at that price box, the offers that are available, and whether those offers are contingent upon anything. And the clarity of your pricing is going to absolutely be something that consumers might want to surface in an LLM prompt, right? It's one of the better uses for an LLM in the context of shopping for inventory. If I'm on ChatGPT, it's easy enough for me to just look for F-150s for sale on a Google search. But if I want to know who's got the best offers in my region, I'd rather have the AI do the work than me have to go through every single dealer, compare like trims, yada, yada, yada. So I might ask that question. That's going to be one of the earliest use cases here. Well, I'm here to tell you that having the best offer is not how you're going to win that search. Having the best offer that can be clearly read by an LLM is how you're going to win that search. If you have a complicated code backend to your price box where the LLM has a hard time differentiating offer from MSRP, sales price from MSRP, they can't parse it cleanly and easily, they just won't surface you because it's unclear. What I recommend you do there is just put one of your VDPs into ChatGPT and ask it if it can understand the price box clearly, or whichever your preferred LLM is. ChatGPT is still the market share leader at the moment, although Gemini is catching up. So the next item is, and this is really going to be the most consistently impactful across the board in all ways, shapes, and forms, is provide the best quality content. We're going to continue to expand upon that further in this episode. But you need to have the best content. That's going to serve your GEO. It's going to serve your SEO. It's going to serve all of the above. And the other thing, and this is very much also traditional and AI search, is your reviews. Reviews, having more of them and higher star rating, it's a tailwind for your SEO in the traditional search sense. And for GEO, it's critical because if someone searches best Ford dealer near Dallas and you're a Ford dealer and you're in Dallas, the bottom line is that the dealer that wins most consistently is very simply going to be the dealer with the best star rating across multiple platforms, particularly Google, which gets the most weighting here. Many of you who are watching will have experienced the thing where you try that and it shows you some weird star rating because it pulled it from your service listing. Consumers know that dealers don't really have 2.4 star ratings. No business stays in business with a 2.4 star rating. So I wouldn't fret so much about that as looking at what is the consensus, what is the actual star rating of your Google listing, and they'll correct more and more to understanding the right reviews to be looking at. But you need to understand that those reviews are the number one ranking factor that you have remotely within your control, and you don't solve that by trying to game the system. You solve that at the showroom level. You solve that with process. You solve that with leadership. And ultimately, the dealership that treats their customers the best, or at least makes them feel that way, is going to be winning the AI search game better than most people who try whatever hocus pocus, FAQs, schema, etc., to game the system. Okay. So those are your action items for that. Now let's move on to content quality. The idea here is attractive, and I understand it, especially for dealer groups. The idea is that if I use AI generated content, I can reduce my either vendor expense or my internal labor expense to be able to generate content more easily. Period, full stop, right? Why not go to ChatGPT and ask it for the landing page on F-150 for sale? You can do that. And if you put enough human work into the content, maybe it works. If you put enough human work into the content. But if you just use AI as your shortcut, you don't end up getting what you think out of that. And so at the end of the day, we have to go back to that premise of traditional search, AI search. It's the best result that is going to serve the consumer's need, that is going to perform the best. It may take time in the LLM space for them to continue to adapt how these systems parse information, just like it took a long time for Google. Google will have an edge because they already did this for traditional search, so Gemini will kind of be able to feed off of that. But in general, this is going to move so much faster than it did once upon a time. And anyone who's been using ChatGPT for multiple years now has seen how ridiculously that has advanced versus its infancy, right? It's so much more nuanced in the way that it can provide information. It's also still got some of the same flaws, interestingly enough. But the bottom line here is that when you think about this from a content standpoint, Google has come out and said outright that using AI generated content as a shortcut, as a way to do less work, ends up being lowest common denominator work, and you get the lowest quality rating for your content. They use AI, yes, for their own algorithms, but that doesn't mean that they're going to reward AI generated content. They want AI, they want their platform, Gemini, to be a force multiplier for people who are generating online content. It's a research tool. It's a way to find more sources to help feed your understanding to be able to generate a rich piece of content. It is not intended to be there to write the piece of content for you. And if you take that shortcut, the long-term result is going to be that you don't do as well in especially traditional search, which is still 99.5% of low funnel opportunity, because Google's already overtly said they don't want that, and they're continuing to double down on that. It's just a matter of time until they detect it. And in most cases, they already can. And LLMs are going to end up going that same way, because ultimately the human generated expertise baked into content is what's going to be the best result for the end user. Think for a moment about how you react personally when you're on YouTube or you're listening to the radio, could be XM, could be terrestrial, and you hear an ad or you see a video that you can tell was AI generated. You hear that slightly AI voice on the radio ad, and it's like, that inflection's just not quite right. It's a little sing-songy for reality. Or you see the video and you're like, oh no, I can tell that this is voiced over from a script that someone fed it. It's not actually a human voice. And it's a bit of a turnoff. And people have commented to you about this. This is something that comes up in conversation, but we forget consumers are wired the same way we are. And what's going to end up happening is when they can tell that it's just kind of drivel, right? Slop, as it's now called. And it's just lowest common denominator work. It will cause a bounce, an exit. And people leaving those pages is a sign of non-quality, which will degrade their visibility both in traditional search and in LLMs, and will lead to that kind of content not being rewarded. This is a natural consequence of poor quality, okay? So what you have to do is write your content for people. And you either need people to write the content, or you need a significant degree of human in the loop to be able to make that content bespoke and valuable to the end user. That's the guideline that Google looks for, and it's ultimately what will end up informing the realities that end up in the AI ecosystem. You can't just use AI as a shortcut. You can use it as a force multiplier, but this is what, Fortune 500 companies and the hyperscalers, they're all finding this. The most recent jobs data came out, and it's no longer believed that AI is causing layoffs. There's some other things that have been in the ecosystem that got misreported or assumed that it was AI. And what the large hyperscalers are already finding, and they've got the macro, labor forces to have figured this out, is that you don't replace the human with AI. You give the human the tools to do more faster with AI. And we need to adopt that. Whether it's your vendor using AI as a shortcut, or whether it's you assuming that you can use it as a shortcut, it's not a shortcut. It's a research tool to speed up your process. It's a way to look at a piece that a human has written and say, did I miss any obvious topics that I should be including to be more valuable to the end user? It's a collaborator as you're working on your content and you want to build the best thing that's going to be better than the consumer's content. So it is important in your content, whether it's AI generated or not, to make sure that it's clear, to make sure that it's relatively concise. I'm not saying don't do long form. Long form is actually better statistically still for traditional search. But you need to have relatively short paragraphs because that's how humans want to read content. And the way that humans read content is also how LLMs are tending to read content. So not FAQs, not bullets per se, but easy to digest information. That's going to be your guiding principle, written by humans for humans. Okay. Keep it clear, keep it concise, keep it real, keep it useful. And that's going to end up serving your end purpose. When in doubt, if you forget everything on the screen, everything I'm talking about, just think, could I have done something more here to make this useful to the end user? Did I take a shortcut that diminished the value to the end user? That's your guiding principle. Okay. Quality versus scale. Continuation on the same theme here. So the idea of using AI generated content also leads to the natural extension. Hey, I could write more pages. And whether you're using AI as the force multiplier or whether you're using human work and you're doing less content times more pages, or whether you're doing more content on fewer pages, you need to decide which one is going to be more valuable, more impactful. We engaged, and we do all human generated work with AI as a force multiplier at Wikimotive. And we engaged in a study over the course of the last 2 years. We have introduced more what we would call short form content, what I think the rest of the industry would still call long form content. So normally a piece of content would be 1,000 plus words in our traditional schema for this, and sometimes they're 4,000 words or 8,000 words if they need to be. But we started introducing for strategic instances with more narrow focuses, we would do a 500, 600 word piece of content. That's still robust, but it was less than the 1,000 word minimum standard that existed before. And it turns out those produce less value when they're shorter. So the idea of doing twice as much content by plurality, twice as many pages or blogs, and cutting that corner on your production length does not serve the end purpose. And the same is going to be true in traditional as it is in LLM space. This topic both covers both of these very much so, because this could be AI generated volume to serve traditional search needs, or it could be the idea of doing content at volume to serve LLM needs. LLMs are cluing in on highly respected entities. So you need to be a large dealer or not even a dealer at all to show up for a lot of LLM citations, because they're gravitating towards car and drivers and motor trends, and the OEMs, they're not gravitating towards local dealers predominantly, especially for informational content. In traditional search, depending on the search, it's a lot more realistic to show up that way, and that's the underpinnings of transactional SEO. But the point here is you don't need more pages, you need better pages. It's better to have content depth. I have a question from Joao. Writing a consistent prompt and asking AI to make it search optimized can have a negative result, question mark. So he's asking if you take a prompt and you ask it to, okay, so ask to make it search optimized. What I think you're asking is if you feed an advanced prompt to an LLM and you try to optimize the content for that more advanced prompt, does that have a negative result? Depends on how much you took a shortcut there, Joao. So if you feed an advanced prompt, like multiple paragraphs of information into the LLM, the first thing it spits out will be fairly robust because it took you a bunch of time to write that prompt. If that prompt is formulaic and you're writing a lot of content on this formulaic prompt where you're just kind of changing things out, yes, now it will start to have a negative result because now you're starting to do largely redundant content based on the same premise. And if you look at those outputs, guarantee you're going to see similar fundamental formats. You're going to see a similar progression in that content. Feed that back into a different LLM and ask it if it thinks it's AI generated. You'll get a clue. So like, let's say in your example here, you used a detailed prompt, you fed it to ChatGPT and you asked it to produce a landing page. Let's say you did that 3 times over and you changed out the model and a couple of details each time. So now you have 3 model pages produced by AI with a compound prompt as the entry point. What happens on the other end? Take those 3 pages, go to Gemini, feed them in and ask it, do you think that these are AI generated? See what it says. It's going to find the patterns, particularly when you put them together. And the fact that it can find those patterns and say, yes, I think so, means it's probably not going to work very well for search. If it says, I think these are human generated, and I'm confident that a human put all the work into this, maybe an LLM helped with a little bit of the details, but it seems like human work to me, you're probably on the right track. Okay. Scaling this and continuing to stay on top of it, continuing to inject that human value and not fall prey to the shortcut that is asking the LLM to do the heavy lifting is the key here. If it saved you all the time, the answer is probably that it's not going to work long term. If it just took its skill and filled in for your weakness, so if you're great at thinking of the consumer need and thinking about your product and your dealership's alignment to that consumer need. And you were able to feed all of that information into the LLM. And then you're just not a great writer. Your skill is not writing. You're not a professional English major writer, and you don't pay a copywriter, but you had all the real authentic thoughts about what needed to be in the content. It may work out to do what's called hybrid work, which is your expertise backed up by AI writing, as long as you take the time to massage it. If you give it a light prompt with just a couple of details and ask it to do the writing, you haven't put enough of the human expertise in on the front end, it's not going to work. Okay. So, bottom line here is make sure that you're focusing on the consumer intent, answering consumer intent. Make sure that you're looking at your competitors. Do your own fan out queries, right? So when you put a prompt into an LLM, it's doing multiple related queries in either a search engine like or literally through search engines kind of way. And so think about the related prompts. If you're trying to figure out, best place to buy a Silverado under 50K, put a similar search into Google and look at which competitors show up, or put that into the LLM for your location and look at which competitors are cited. There often will be commonalities, but it can be quite different. And in both cases, look at what those competitors are showing up with. Look at the parameters. We're doing that study where we're doing more than 5,000 data points per dealer in the study. So we're looking at that in high volume and finding the legitimate commonalities. But even in your anecdotal cases, look at those competitors. Figure out, do they have more information on their cited page than you have on yours? Time to plus up your info. Okay. Try and be as robust as possible without getting or needlessly wordy. If you just start adding fluff, that's not good for anything. It's not good for traditional search. It's not going to help you with LLMs. Be clear. We're back to the same things that we said in the last section. Okay. AI overviews. All right. So just for clarity here for everybody, AI overviews are when you type something into a traditional Google search and you get a paragraph or a few answer at the top with a few cited resources, right? And you presumably want to be one of those cited resources. Well, here's what you need to know about AI overviews. They almost never show up for low funnel searches. Okay. If you type in Chevy dealers, Ford dealers, Toyota dealers, Mazda dealers as your search term, you won't see an AI overview. If you type in a model for sale keyword, like Mazda CX-5 for sale, like Silverado for sale, Ford Mach-E for sale, you won't see an AI overview. Even keywords like best Ford dealers are often now not producing an AI overview. Why is that? It's because Google understands that you can't provide a useful answer to the end user in a paragraph or two. When the intent is low funnel, it's more qualified. What is the paragraph answer that would be provided to the keyword Ford dealers? There are many Ford dealers in your area, blah, blah, blah. It's just taking up space. That's not a useful answer. If you type in best Ford dealers, well, you can see how it could produce an answer. You could do it based on star rating. So sometimes it'll show up, but these days actually less and less, interestingly. What about CX-5 for sale? Why would anyone want a paragraph answer to CX-5 for sale? They want either the VLA cards across the top, that's paid search, or they want to find one of the traditional answers. Could be a third party, could be a dealer, but they want to find a link where they can go find CX-5s for sale. They don't need to have some paragraph trying to intuit what their needs are and answer some question. They didn't ask a research question, they asked a buying question. They need to find inventory or find a dealer in these examples. So AI overview shows up for high funnel searches. All right. So the myth is that I need to show up and I need to be cited. And I'm here to tell you, heck no, you don't. Does it happen incidentally as part of a robust content strategy on a website? Sure, it does. And is that cool and fine for you to show up for an AI overview and potentially get some clicks on that citation? Yeah. But AI overviews show up for high funnel searches, which means they show up for national searches. If you type in Silverado towing capacity as a search, there will probably be an AI overview. And also, if you look at the results on the page, they will be all over the country. They won't be local to you. So what you need to understand is that the traffic you potentially can get from an AI overview citation, the value you can get from that citation is not a net positive for you. Those people don't convert. They were high funnel, they were researching high funnel, and they're all over the country. You need to focus on low funnel because you care about outcomes. You care about getting leads, whether it's sales or service. And those do not align to searches that produce an AI overview. So remember what your outcome is. Remember what searches matter. Low funnel is what drives opportunity. High funnel is just it's a side effect. It's a side effect of a robust content strategy. You should have things like informational blogs, but only because they're interlinked with lower funnel content that's of higher value to your objectives. Okay. Please set aside AI overviews as a focus area. You really need to focus on low funnel, legitimately helpful pages that serve low funnel intention and making sure that the robust information on those is able to rise to the top in both traditional search and in the form of AI search. Okay. AI visibility scores. I touched on this in the first installment of this series, and an AI visibility score is like one of those scores that says you grade 30 out of 100 for AI visibility. And most of you who are watching this right now have probably received an AI visibility score in your inbox at some point. You might have received 10 of them. It's usually from a vendor who is trying to sell you something. It could be your existing website vendor trying to sell you some kind of an upgrade. It could be another vendor trying to tell you, hey, you're not doing well because your score of 20 out of 100 is alarming and you should pay us to fix that. Throw this out the window. I showed on the first installation of this a live example of what this looks like. So go back and check that out if you want to see exactly what this looks like in the leading tool that can even produce these. Most of them are devoid of context. Okay. So you get compared to things like the OEM or Car and Driver and Motor Trend. You get compared on informational subject matter and prompts, and worse, AI visibility scores heavily use the large prompt library that whatever the chosen platform is. So in the example of SEMrush, which is the leader in doing this, and is actually, they have the best capabilities overall, they have this catalog of pre-compiled prompts where they're always querying this so that they can figure out, do you show up or don't you? Problem is, you'll get random things like, where can I get a certificate, a technical certificate as a mechanic, as a prompt to you as a Chevy dealer who's trying to sell more cars? It's just totally mismatched. And that was frankly a favorable example because at least it was automotive in nature. You'll get some that have nothing to do with it. Unique car names for girls comes to mind as one that I've seen and used in one of my examples at one point. So the point here is that AI visibility scores are comprised of irrelevant information. The way that you should actually handle this is to do curated AI visibility tracking. I'm not saying AI visibility tracking is wrong. We're doing it in the study that we're doing to figure out what levers and knobs matter. So I definitely think that value can be derived, or at least knowledge can be derived for hopefully future use as this becomes more relevant. But you need to take a more manual approach. There is no shortcut to doing this properly. No tool out there provides just a score that gives you any relevant information about how you're doing. All right. So in something like SEMrush or in any of the platforms, SEMrush has location capabilities, and that's important. You need to input all of the prompts that you want to track. The flaw with that is that you have no idea how frequently those prompts are used. And all prompts are kind of you're one human being's version of what that would be entered as. If somebody uses a more complex prompt, or they write 4 paragraphs describing to Gemini what they're trying to accomplish, you've got a lot of prompts baked in there, and you're going to have a lot of fan out queries. So results are going to be very variable. But if you can kind of distill down to what are the core things that I'm trying to make sure I show up for in an LLM? It's my model for sales searches. It's my dealer discovery searches. It's my brand sentiment searches around my own store name. Load that prompt set into your tracking. Make sure it's location specific, which SEMrush can do, and view where you show up and where you don't. and look at who does show up to make sure that you're comparing yourself realistically. If it's all third parties that show up, well, you may be somewhat powerless in that particular instance, at least for the time being, the way that that LLM is perceiving the authority of those entities versus the dealers that could be available. If it's your competitors, time to start looking at what they're doing and what you're not and putting those two things together. But remember, this is not highly actionable information on its own. Because even if you're doing curated prompt tracking and visibility tracking on the individual prompt level, there's no score that comes into play here. It's individual tracking. Even if you look at that and you see, I'm not showing up where I want to be showing up, and yes, my competitor is showing up, your answer is still not going to be, according to all of the current data, your answer is not going to be unique GEO practices. The answer is going to be properly optimize for search as a whole so that you show up well in traditional search, where 99.5% of today's market share is, and also for GEO, which is at 0.5% and slowly rising. Okay. It's mostly going to be content. Secondarily, it's also going to be your reviews and the quality and quantity of them, and also the clarity of your merchandising and your offers. Those are the primary levers that you'll need to focus on here in order to move the needle inside of this picture with prompts specifically curated and tracked. All right. So now is a good time for questions. The team curated for me a handful of questions that have been asked since the last episode. So on LinkedIn, feel free to reach out to us in between episodes. If you think of something later after this and you're like, hey, I want this answered on the next episode, drop us one. So the team curated some questions for me. I have not read these yet. So we're going to do this live together. And if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and I'll also answer those. But the team picked these out from ones that have been asked publicly since the last episode. So I understand not chasing AI tricks, but I assume at some point you had to adapt strategies because of AI. What's something you recommend doing differently today than you recommended 2 years ago? Okay, so yes, over time, you need to adapt strategies because of AI, but you need to be careful to not do that instead of the practices that are inherent to traditional search, where most of the market share is. So the answer and the way that we've approached this is yes and. Okay. It's not do something different instead of, because that would be ridiculous. That would shoot our dealers in the foot. That'd be not a good idea at all. The answer is yes and. It's continue to do the fundamentals that serve both disciplines, but also pay attention to things that we're finding in our studies that are demonstrating net new levers that we could be using to future-proof our dealers and recommend this to everybody else for GEO specifically. Okay, so I think the best example that exists that is unique, that so far is not a major component of traditional search visibility, would be clarity in your pricing stack. We originally thought it was schema. We actually pursued that heavily. We hammered away at the website vendors who don't have the right schema options baked into their platforms to get those enabled and to be able to update schema. And with a handful of our dealers, we were able to get significant schema overhauls done, all to no effect. As it turned out, our study, as we got more and more volume of data, is also proving out that schema is not a major predictor of, and by the way, schema structured markup would be the more broadly correct way of saying that. Schema structured markup, not a significant predictor of being able to show up as a top-sided result in low funnel results in LLMs. So the issue here is that a product schema versus a vehicle schema. A VDP should technically have a vehicle schema. It's a schema type that's available, and almost none of the website platforms are using vehicle schema. They're using a product schema because that was what was available probably at the time that they all came into being, and it's what they standardized on. Would it be better to use a vehicle schema for clarity? Sure. Is there really any critically missing information in the product schema that is needed in the vehicle schema and it's stopping LLMs from understanding the VDP? No, not really. So what's happening is that because they can read a page in a practical sense, as long as the code is clear, And as long as the schema provides enough information, they can parse what's there. And so that's not a lever. Pricing clarity is number one. Weirdly enough, I actually found that it was on one of the more basic, older school website platforms where I saw some of the best clarity in the coding of the price box. And therefore, a dealer with a kind of dated website platform was actually the one that was showing up better in some of my anecdotal sample searches as I was researching this topic. My recommendation: take your VDP, feed it into your preferred LLM. ChatGPT still has the largest market share, especially for consumers, for regular consumers. Okay. Claude is big with professionals, Gemini gaining market share across the board. ChatGPT is by far the market share leader in people who are doing low funnel searches and ending up on a dealership website. So I'd recommend put it in ChatGPT, put your VDP in, and ask it to tell you about the pricing on that vehicle. Ask it to give you a description in layman's terms of what it sees, what the offers are, and then ask it to compare that to the rest of the marketplace and see what you get. If you show up poorly against that, you may need to have a conversation with your website vendor. You may need to think about, do I have a digital retailing platform that is replacing my price box with something complicated and coded from the outside that's blurring, muddying the waters here? Okay. Next question. Our website provider just pitched us a GEO package, and which one hasn't? They showed us reports, AI visibility scores, and talked a lot about optimizing for ChatGPT. After sitting through your webinars, thank you, I am honestly not sure what I'm supposed to make of that anymore. Can you can you prove that they are selling snake oil? Sure, with basically everything that we've just said. And I think the last episode is really the one to check out, because our study and the robustness of our approach, our scientific approach to this, is really demonstrating that these sort of technical levers that people are claiming are really a load of crap, and that it's content, content, content. It's back to basics. It's fundamentals. You can't take shortcuts, and you can't just magically get more for less money. Like, think about what this means in the larger ecosystem. If it's possible, just take for a moment the notion that it's possible to rank with AI generated content, okay? Both in traditional search and or in LLMs. Take for a moment for granted that it's possible to do that. I'm not saying it is, but just take for a moment that that's something that you could do. And as a dealer group or as an individual dealer, you could pay way less money to a dealer, or you can just take it internally because it's easy enough for you to produce that content at scale that way. Everybody is going to do that. So even if that works, even if that's an effective way to right this moment generate a result because you were the first mover to be able to scale up your content approach in a way that your competitors didn't, that advantage is ridiculously fleeting, because what's happening is we're flooding the market with everyone doing this relatively lowest common denominator, high volume, low effort approach to SEO, GEO, content generation at large. And what's going to happen is it's all going to become an equal shade of gray. And you know what's going to stand up above the top of that? The AI generated content that had a lot more human thought that went into the prompt, that had a lot more human massaging, or better yet, the content that was just written by a human being who knew what they were doing. The pieces of content that provide the most value, however you got there, are going to be the ones that rise above the scaled approaches. Your scaled approach is not a special snowflake. In fact, it's the opposite. It is fungible. It is the same across the board. And by taking that approach or entrusting that to a vendor that's claiming to be able to do your GEO for you at scale cheaply, you're shooting yourself in the foot, especially long term. You're going to have a lot of catch up to do. I would say you need to focus on high quality approaches. And anyone who's saying that GEO is a unique discipline is missing the point. It needs to be, we cover search holistically. Next, if we cut back on the amount of content we're producing to improve on what we already have, do we risk falling behind by publishing less? Nuanced question. I like this one. This is advanced content theory, and I would say it depends on what you currently have going on the website. So if you're in like day one of a robust SEO initiative and you basically don't have any high quality content. You've just got a bunch of blogs from yesteryear on trim levels and towing capacity. I would say you need to be producing net new content, not just improving some of the blog articles that you had. That's not good enough. However, if you're a long way down the road and you've produced a lot of high quality content, it is important to remember that these things can age and that can become inaccurate with time, even if you intended for them to be evergreen. And recency is a traditional ranking factor. So I would say that it's a hybrid approach. It's not stop producing new content and just, massage what you've already got. That could definitely leave some opportunity on the table looking at net new keywords and geographies you haven't served. But I would say don't just keep on producing more and more and more and more and more redundant content myopically into the end of time. That's a terrible idea because if you eventually start to just have content redundancy gone wild on your website, that actually degrades the quality of your site. And eventually you end up on the wrong side of scaled content abuse guidelines, which is not a good thing to do. So you need to be going back to existing content, seeing, how is it ranking over time? 99.5% of low funnel opportunity is still in the realm of traditional search, not LLM search, not GEO. So that means rank tracking is still a relevant thing to be doing as a leading indicator and as a diagnostic tool for your strategy. So if you're doing rank tracking on Google and your landing page has, it came up to position 1 and now it's down to position 3 and seemingly falling, it's time to go back to that piece of content and plus it back up to position 1 to 3x your click through rate, by the way, before you worry about another piece of content for some ancillary need, possibly building redundancy. Okay, so that's the last one. Yep, there were 3 of them. So next session will be Wednesday, August 5th, 1 p.m. I will hang out here for another minute just to see if anyone wants to drop a question in the chat. And otherwise, I appreciate everyone's time. I hope to see you on the next episode. Feel free to reach out in the meantime if you have any questions about your strategy, SEO, GEO, anything in between. I don't mind answering questions. You don't have to take a pitch or a demo or any of that. I like to be a resource. That's why we do these things. And it's for the betterment of the industry. And I love dispelling myths because there's a lot of snake oil that's floating around in the industry. So thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.